Well, hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Thank you so much for being here. If you are new to the channel, my name is Sophia and I make book-related videos, mainly videos about literary fiction and mystery thriller, however, a little bit of everything. And today I am back with one of my absolute favorite videos to film, which is reading every single book that a particular author has written. And today, of course, we are talking about Claire Keegan. I've done a couple of other renditions of this. These tend to be very like vloggy, chatty style videos. And the other ones that I've done were reading Sally Rooney, reading Coco Mellors, both very different experiences. But I read through all of the author's published work in publication order, and I tell you what I think of them. If I'm going to pick up further books that they release after the ones that I read for this video, if I notice trends in their work as they move forward in publication, as they write more work. Do I like it? Do I not like it? So I always find these really fun, and I feel that after doing a video like this, I truly feel more in tune with that author, and I feel that I get a better sense of who they are as a writer. And so, as I said, today we're doing Claire Keegan. I always pick an author that I think I'm going to have a good time with, because if I pick somebody that I'm not going to like, I either abandon the video if I'm truly hating all of their work halfway through, or I am just in a bad time for a week, because generally, you know, authors' books are pretty similar between all of them. Okay, I am very much rambling. Before I get into all the books that I'm going to read in the order that I'm going to read them in, I always start these videos out with a little bit about the author. From trusty old Wikipedia. So let me pull that up and let's learn a little bit about Claire Keegan. One of the reasons while this is loading that I picked Claire Keegan is because I just have a great track record with reading Irish literature. I've really loved a lot of different Irish authors. So this felt like it was going to be a win. I also love short books because I don't like rambling and, as I'm doing right now, I don't like rambling and repetitiveness throughout books. And so I have a really good feeling about this. Okay, so Claire Keegan, born in 1968. I did not know that. I actually thought she was born more recently. But what do I know? Is an Irish writer known for her short stories, which have been published in the New Yorker, Best American Short Stories, Granta, and the Paris Review. She's known for her novellas, two of which have been adapted as films. Interesting. So she was born in Ireland as one of a large family, and then it sounds like she moved. Oh, I did not know this. She traveled to New Orleans when she was 17 and studied English and political science at Loyola University. And then she returned to Ireland in 1992. Her first publication was Antarctica, which I'll talk to you about, which came out in 1999. And then her most recent publication was in 2022. So she's been writing for a long time. Oh, she was raised on a farm. That's so interesting. I'd love that. All right. Well, that's kind of some general information about her. And let me get into her releases and the order. You know what? I will go. So I'm going to go through the books in publication order, and I'll pop the year on the screen and some information about it, like the number of pages, so that you guys know a little bit more about them. So the first is Antarctica. Then Walk the Blue Field. I'm a little annoyed that this cover doesn't match the other covers, but we can't have everything we want. Foster, maybe the cutest book I've ever owned. The Forster's Daughter. I think this is like 60 tiny little pages. And then the ones that she's probably most known for, Small Things Like These. And finally, So Late in the Day. So yes, I am going to be attempting to read 6 books in this video, but they're all extremely short. So I just have a good feeling about it. So I'm going to read them in publication order. So starting out with Antarctica, which is actually the longest one. And I'm planning to get started with it tonight on the couch with a nice big cup of peppermint tea. And I'll let you know my initial thoughts. So before I get into my initial Claire Keegan thoughts, I did go to the bookstore today. Whoops. I am going to talk about these more in a haul, but I'm just going to list the titles here just so that you guys know what is on my list. So I picked up the last Lisa Jewell release, which is None of This Is True. I think she has a new one coming out in June, but a lot of people were liking this thriller release. So, and of course, I saw not the next Miss Marple, but the one after in the bookstore, which is the next one that I don't own. So I picked this up. Obsessed with the title and a cattail. We can't, that makes it even better. But this looks really beautiful. Then 2 hardbacks. Whoops. I picked up Heartwood by Amity Grace. This is I believe a mystery novel. Here I was saying I was not going to give you guys details because I need to talk about Claire Keegan. 42-year-old vanished on the Appalachian Trail, 200 miles from her destination. So it's kind of a missing person story, but I've heard really excellent things about this. This was on a lot of celebrity book lists and people were all about it. And then I saw The Road to Tender Hearts by Annie Hartnett. So this was on the Modern Mrs. Darcy / What Should I Read Next summer reading guide list. And it was one of her main picks for the summer. So if you follow that, Clarence. So if you follow that, it's a podcast and book club where she basically makes different reading guides for different seasons. And so this was one of her top releases. And I hadn't heard a whole lot about it, but it looks really adorable. And the cover is just stunning. All right. Well, sorry for kind of a chaotic start to the clip, but we have some updates to do because I have started making my way through Antarctica. I am now on page right around page 100, so nearing the halfway point. Did not quite realize, which is silly, I should have known this, that this was a short story collection, and her second book is also a short story collection. She didn't get into doing novellas until, I want to say Foster is a novella. I could be wrong about that. But her first couple of releases were at least short story collections. I'm enjoying this so far. I have to say that short stories are not always my jam because I like to sit with characters. I like to experience multiple situations with them, not just like one scene. But I do feel like Claire Keegan's writing lends itself really well to short stories and short narratives because every single one of her words is there for a reason. And that's something I really love about her. So this collection is called Antarctica which is because the first story in this collection is called Antarctica. Not all of them surround that theme. It's just kind of named after one of the more popular stories. I would say these aren't really intertwining in terms of like one character hasn't popped up in another story, but they do deal with some similar themes, being interpersonal relationships, like people that have been in long-term relationships, marriages, power dynamics in those relationships, toxic masculinity. A lot of these stories take place in Ireland, which is kind of a unifying theme, but also just makes sense because she's an Irish author and she lives in Ireland. Except for one of the stories so far has taken place in the U.S. South, and I learned that she went to school in Louisiana, so that's probably why. Yeah, so as I said, these stories so far are really gripping me. I have been truly very impressed with her writing so far. I just wish that I want to sink into it a little bit more. You can't miss a single word in here because every single word is so important. And so that's something that's giving me like a little bit of anxiety. There have been so many stunning quotes. I wanted to share just the first paragraph from the first story, Antarctica, with you guys. And then I will tag a few more quotes for you tomorrow. But it says, every time the happily married woman went away, she wondered how it would feel to sleep with another man. That weekend, she was determined to find out. It was December. She felt a curtain closing on another year. She wanted to do this before she got too old. She was sure she would be disappointed. Like, what an interesting start to a story. You just like want to know what's going to happen. So yes, thoroughly enjoying this. I will let you know my future thoughts after I do a bit more reading tomorrow, and probably need to finish this tomorrow if I'm going to finish all of these books within a week. So with that, I'm going to head to bed. I am super tired, and I will see you guys tomorrow. So happy Tuesday. Tuesday. Yeah. So we have had some type of insect event in our back garden. So I don't know how this happened, but basically I went outside today and there are all of these little like midge bugs everywhere, like thousands of them. I'm not a huge insect person, so I'm not thrilled about it. I don't know if it's like we left some standing water out and they were able to breed there. But basically outside has been off limits today, which means I've been inside and reading and being cozy, although it has been kind of on the rainier end anyways, so it all worked out for the best. I did go for a quick swim. I swam about like 2,000 yards, 80 laps, lengths. I'll put it up on the screen, but always don't want to do it. And after I do it, I feel really much better. So that was lovely. And then just been reading some KEEGAN, having a chill day, went to Trader Joe's, the work. So I did finish Antarctica. I started Walk the Blue Field, and I made a discovery that makes this reading vlog feel a little bit less overwhelming. I actually made 2 discoveries. So let me start with the discoveries, and then I'll tell you what I thought of Antarctica and what I'm thinking of Walk the Blue Fields. First thing that I determined is The Forester's Daughter. This book is really, really cute. I'm so glad I have it. However, it is already a short story in this book, so it's not like a separate thing. Also, I was just perusing so late in the day. I was a little curious, and I realized that at the end of this book, there is Antarctica. So slightly less to read. But yeah, just making a couple of discoveries by actually reading through the books that I own rather than just Wikipediaing things. So let me chat about Antarctica. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I stand that the writing was stunning. it did not feel to me like a complete story collection. And it didn't feel cohesive in that way. Yes, there are some similar themes between the stories. No, the characters don't follow between the stories, but I know not to expect that with short story collections. But it just didn't feel like cohesive. And I was looking a little bit around and I realized that a lot of these were published in other journals and then kind of put into this collection. And so it feels like there's some really intense stories dealing with similar themes that feel a little cohesive. And then there's one that I like don't resonate with and doesn't feel like it fits with the other ones. It just didn't like quite come together, even though I think the craft was there. My favorite ones in here were Antarctica, Burns, and Sisters. I thought were all stunning. Some of the ones set in the south of the US just felt weird to me. Like they didn't work as a story and they didn't work in this anthology. But yeah, middle of the road. Then I have picked up Walk the Blue Fields, which is another story collection. However, a large portion of this is The Forester's Daughter. So like a chunk in the middle, it is by far the longest story in the collection. So I've read the first few short stories before we get to that one. And so far I've had two big wins stories and one that I didn't understand and didn't make a lot of sense to me. I loved the first one, The Parting Gift. Some of the themes that were really present and beautiful were like nostalgia after leaving a place for a long time. Like that story follows a young girl who is leaving to go to America, leaving her parents' home in rural Ireland. And she truly went through some horrific things living with her parents, abuse. But as she is leaving there, like every little thing just stands out to her, and she has this like nostalgia and grief and like trauma at the same time. And I think that those emotions were all done really well. This story also touched on some of the dynamics, like the dynamics within the family, not just like the husband and wife dynamics, mom and dad dynamics, but also a lot of other things were beautiful. The whole story was written in second person, which is interesting. I haven't seen a lot of short stories that are written that way, but I'll just share one quote, which is on page 5. You place your dirty dishes on the draining board. You have nothing to say to your mother. If you started, you would say the wrong things, and you wouldn't want it to end that way. You go upstairs, but you'd rather not go back into the room. You stand on the landing. They start talking in the kitchen, but you don't hear what they say. A sparrow swoops down onto the window ledge and pecks at his reflection, his beak striking the glass. You watch him until you can't watch him any longer, and he flies away. I think the imagery is really stunning and the symbolism is very stunning in Claire Keegan. So yes, excited to get into The Forester's Daughter. I am a little curious, like why, like I loved Walk the Blue Fields. It's a story about kind of like a tragic wedding. But I'm curious why that was the headline title, not Forester's Daughter, given that Forester's Daughter takes up so much of this book. But I'm not mad about it. Like I really enjoyed that story. The one that I did not like is called Dark Horses. I just didn't understand it and it didn't like fit with the other ones for me. But again, personal preference. So yeah, gonna do a bit more reading tonight and then hopefully maybe dive into Forester's Daughter. It seems really good. I'm very conflicted. I don't think I can annotate this. It's like too cute. But I want to read this, but I also want to highlight quotes. So I might read it and annotate in that book and then like flip through here just to get the experience of reading this really, really adorable little book. currently Thursday evening. I'm running a little bit late for my in-person book club where we're going to chat about The Family Experiment by John Mars. I'll tell you guys what I thought of it in my May wrap up. But even though it's evening time and I'm about to go to my book club, I literally just got out of my pajamas because Tyler and I just sat on the couch all day and did wedding planning things. Like Tyler got his suits, we did hotel blocks, we looked into transportation, we just did all this stuff that's been on the bucket list and we've needed to do for so long. And it was a really liberating feeling going through our checklist and just checking off a lot of the things that we've been putting off. And I think it'll be a good way to end the day off, just, going to a book club with some girls that I really enjoy spending time with and just having a relaxing evening. But I do have quite the reading update for you guys because I have finished not one, but two Claire Keegan books. So let's start with, I guess, three if we're counting Forrester's Daughter, but that seems like a little bit of a exaggeration. So first off, we have Walk the Blue Fields, of course, a short story collection. And I ended up giving this one a 4 stars. I overall enjoyed it more than Antarctica. My favorite stories in here were Forrester's Daughter. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes on my phone on my lap. Walk the Blue and also Parting Gift I thought were stunning. Some of the other ones were like middle of the road, and there were a couple that just didn't work for me. Most of the time, not because of the writing, but just because of the way that the story was told or the plot of the story. I didn't resonate with that part as much. But when everything came together, the plot, the beautiful writing, they were just absolute bangers. A lot of these stories dealt with grief, loss, change, particularly change in like family life or in living situations. And a lot of them really dealt with motherhood too in a really nuanced way. And I don't know if those were just the themes that I kind of caught onto, but I felt like a lot of the stories were relating to some female character who was getting tied down in some relationship that she didn't want to be in, or motherhood, or not being able to have children, or something like that were really prominent in the stories. The prose was so descriptive. It was almost fairy tale-like at times, which is something that I love when it's done right. It's mixed in with this really like beautiful, descriptive, easy to read writing, and then these like one-liners that just stick with you and make you stop and think a little bit. For instance, on page 132, there's a quote that says, Margaret waited for a windy day, opened the umbrella, and jumped off the boiler house wall, believing she would fly, and landed with a broken ankle on the car road. If only in her adult life her unfounded beliefs could be so abruptly disproved. To be an adult was, for the greatest part, to be in darkness. Like, such an interesting line. Another cracker line was, and maybe the wedding planning is make me underline this, but weddings are hard. The drink flows and the words come out, and he has to be there. A man loses his daughter to a younger man. A woman sees her son throwing himself on a lesser woman. It is something they half believe. There's the expense, the sentiment, the no going back. Anytime promises are made in public, people cry. Hopefully my wedding is not that way, but what a absolute cracker of a paragraph that just makes you stop in your tracks and you can't go on until you think about it. And one other line I really loved from really shows Claire Keegan's gift with showing, not telling the reader things are happening. So there's a paragraph on page 17 that says, without any reference to time, the priest welcomed everyone and went on to perform the ceremony. There was a moment when he stumbled over the words, but before long the vows were made and Jackson had the plain gold ring on her finger. In the vestry, the priest noticed how the bride's hand shook as she lifted the heavy fountain pen, how sparingly the dark ink flowed onto the register, but Jackson's bold strokes clearly signified his name. Like, clearly this is about a man who really wants to marry this woman and she doesn't want to, but they never say that. Just the way that the words are written gives you so much more than if she just came out and said that sentence. I also really love the descriptions of the Irish countryside. I feel like it grounded this. It felt like somebody who has lived there for a long time. It felt like something that Claire Keegan has experienced and knows all of the little details when, certain things are in season and when the potatoes are harvested and when the whatever happens, gave it that like authenticity that I think really made this feel realistic. I think like when I read this book, I thought to myself, you know, if one of these long stories turned into a novella, I would love it so, so much. And that's exactly what happened with Foster. Oh, real quick, before I talk about Foster, I did read Forster's Daughter in the little book. It was a wonderful, very heartwarming reading experience. 10 out of 10 would recommend picking up this little version of the short story. Foster, 5 out of 5, favorite book of the year. Like, I don't know how this has been on my shelf for months and I haven't picked it up because I've been waiting for this vlog, and it just makes me sad that I deprived myself of that experience. But this was stunning. I'm almost at a loss for words, but I loved this so, so, so much. You are not getting a middle of the book wrap up of this one or middle of the book update because I finished it in one sitting. It's 92 pages, but it goes very quickly because the pages are short and also the spacing on the pages is pretty like wide spaced. And so this really is like a one sitting type of book. And I would recommend reading it that way because I think like the emotional nuance of it would like struck me a lot more just getting everything in one time. This is a book that is told from the perspective of a young girl. She's not given a name, but she basically at the beginning is being dropped off by her father to live with some relatives called the Kinsellas. And it's not explicitly said why, but essentially there's a lot of children at home and not a lot of resources to care for the children. And so the family needs some help. And so essentially she's being fostered by this other family for a summer. And it's basically tells the story of the child's connection to this family, of her growing into herself, of her missing things from home, and just the complexities of that experience. I think that few books do a great job of telling a story from a child's perspective in a believable way and writing it in a believable way. And this just, like, the attention to detail was so good. One quote I wanted to share with you guys is on page 8. It says, "When the men come in from the yard, it grows momentarily dark, then brightens once again when they sit down." Like, even just that little description, because obviously she's so much shorter than them, these big men, like, it shades her. And they're not saying, like, the girl is short, the men are tall, but like that description grounds it in being the child's voice, but also puts the reader in that position, makes the reader like have that like visceral image that you can be there, and it's just so much more realistic. This tugs at your heartstrings. I did cry. It is so simple but so complex at the same time. The emotions aren't forced, but they're just present. This honestly feels like the best short stories in the short story collections, but even better. And I'm so excited to get on to small things like these and so late in the day, because it just feels like the jump from the short stories collections to Foster feels really profound and large. And even though those are beautiful and biting and incredible, like this is just a whole nother level. And so is my next favorite book like one foot to my right? Like it maybe could be, and that's just so exciting. But yes, 5 stars, incredible. All right, I have ranted about Foster for way longer than I needed to, and I'm late to book club, so I'm gonna head out. But then hopefully pick up one of the other Claire Keegans tonight, because I like cannot wait. I literally cannot wait. So it's currently Friday afternoon. Book club was really lovely yesterday. So much fun to just like chat with the girls, chat about books. It eventually devolved into a conversation about crazy roommates in college, which was also a fun topic of conversation. But this morning, the bug issues have continued. Our entire house is literally like frosting on a cake, bugs everywhere. I am terrified to go out of the house because I literally think they're all just going to fly in. But I have Orange Theory and I have work tonight, so I can't really do anything about that. The cats are going to hopefully have eaten their Wheaties so that they can eat these bugs when they come into our house. I don't know. It's grossing me out, but hopefully it will be done soon. Because I was literally trapped in the house all day and had nothing to do other than read, I read Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, which I also gave 5 stars. She can do no wrong. This is also perfection that I adored in every possible way. So this is also a very short novella, 114 pages, so slightly longer than Foster, but still definitely on the shorter end, which keeps with her trend. She never writes anything more than about like a little over 100 pages. This is a book about a middle-aged man named Bill Furlong. He is a coal merchant living in Ireland, and this takes place around Christmas time, so it really does feel like a little bit of a Christmassy book. It gives me Christmas Carol vibes, and I have to keep reminding myself that this does not, in fact, take place in that time period. It takes place in the 1980s. So Bill lives with his wife Eileen and his many daughters. And Eileen is a very practical woman. She's worried about balancing the budget and providing for their daughters and making sure that everything is taken care of. But Bill has this pull to consider, like, what is the bigger message? Like, what are we doing here? Why, are we here just to worry about small things like these, the day-to-day tasks, or is there something more to worry about? Or not necessarily worry about, but like more to consider. Is there something more to this life than just like balancing the numbers and doing the things we're supposed to do to get to the end of the day? On page 35, there's a great quote about this where he says, "What was it all for?" Furlong wondered. "The work and the constant worry, getting up in the dark and going to the yard, making the deliveries one after another, the whole day long, then coming home in the dark and trying to wash the black off himself and sitting into a dinner at the table and falling asleep before waking in the dark to meet a version of the same thing yet again. Might things never change or develop into something else or new?" And the thing that he really sees himself as bigger than these day-to-day menial tasks is talked about on page 112. As they carried on along and met more people, Furlong did and did not know. He found himself asking, was there any point to being alive without helping one another? Was it possible to carry on along all the years, the decades, through an entire life without once being brave enough to go against what was there, and yet call yourself a Christian and face yourself in the mirror? Seeing one's family and taking care of the intimate things that are in your life versus reaching out, versus going beyond that, finding the greater meaning in things. I think that's what this book really deals with. And it does feel kind of, like Christmas stories often have like a moral of the story. It does feel like that, not in a preachy way, but just that there's kind of a greater meaning, a greater idea to take from it that is definitely kind of addressed at the end. One other thing I also loved so much about this book is how, obviously this time in Ireland, there were a lot of different things going on. One of those things was conflict between Protestants and Catholics. The way that it was brought up and addressed in here, I thought was so stunning. This was on page 6 for this quote. When Bill was growing up, he lived with this woman named Mrs. Wilson and his mother. And so they all kind of like lived in the same place. And so this is a quote talking about like how religion kind of played into their life. As he grew, Mrs. Wilson, who had no children of her own, took him under her wing, gave him little jobs, and helped him along with his reading. She had a small library and didn't seem to care much for what judgment others passed, but carried temperately along with her own life, living off the pension she received on account of her husband having been killed in the war. And what income that came from her small herd of well-minded Herefords and Cheviot ewes. Ned, the farmhand, lived in too, and seldom was there much friction around the place, or with neighbors, as the land was well fenced and managed, and no money was owing. Neither was there much tension over religious beliefs, which on both sides were lukewarm. On Sundays, Mrs. Wilson simply changed her dress and shoes, pinned her good hat onto her head, and was driven as far as the church by Ned in the Ford, which was then driven a little further on, with mother and child, to the chapel. And when they returned home, both prayer books and the Bible were left laying on the hall stand until the following Sunday or holy day. I think in that like quiet way, it really says so much about all the characters, but in just like a simple one action, one type of like on Sunday, what did they do? And I think another example of what I think Claire Keegan does so well in her writing. So yes, this was stunning. Again, another 5 stars that I absolutely loved. So I only have one more Claire Keegan to get through, and that, of course, is So Late in the Day. So I'm going to pick that up maybe tonight, but I think probably tomorrow because I want to give myself a little time to digest small things like these. And yeah, can she do it again? Another 5 star. I don't know. We'll see. All right, so it is currently Saturday afternoon and it's time to wrap up this vlog because I've officially read everything that Claire Keegan has put out into the world that has been published in a book. That was a very odd way of saying that. So first off, before I get into the whole wrap up segment, I'm going to chat with you about So Late in the Day and my thoughts about this, and then we'll go through everything that I read for this vlog, kind of do a little ranking of my favorite to least favorite of her work, and of course, would I pick up something else that she publishes in the future. So the subtext of this collection is stories of women and men, which I think is true. Like these are all about some type of relationship between a woman and a man. But I think that if we added on a couple of words to that, it would be dysfunctional, misogynistic relationships of women and men, which of course Claire Keegan wouldn't do because too many words, not necessary. And we're going to get the rest of that in this collection. This collection really displays misogyny in 3 very different ways, but each way it's clearly there. And I think it unifies this collection. And I've never read a collection that is so profoundly about misogyny. So it was a really interesting read. I'm going to mainly focus on the first story, which is called So Late in the Day, because I've actually already read the other 2 in the other collections. And they were stories that I enjoyed from the other collections, but I did think that the best story in here was the title story, So Late in the Day. So again, similar to her other work, this is not a forced story. It's very subtle, it's very understated, but the message is very clear throughout it. So in So Late in the Day, you're following a main character named Kale, and he is a worker in an office building. At the beginning of the story, you understand that you know, he's going about his day in his office job, and something's like clearly not right with him. Like he seems upset, everything's bothering him, but you don't quite know why. And as you go on in the story, you learn that he used to be in a relationship with a woman named Sabine, and that relationship has clearly ended. And so the reason for his frustration and for his mood is basically reminiscing about that relationship and what went wrong in it and why they weren't able to stay together. Even when they're in love, like at the beginning of this collection, you can still see the writing on the wall, and it's not good. On page 13, it says, little more than a year ago, he had almost run down the stairwell from the office to meet Sabine on the entrance to Marion Square, where the statue of Wilde lay against a rock. She was wearing a white trouser suit and sandals, sunglasses, a string of multicolored beads around her neck. They'd crossed over to the National Gallery to see the Vermeer exhibition. She paid for the tickets online. He had stood in close, breathing in her perfume as they viewed the paintings. Although she admired Vermeer's women, most to him looked idle, sitting around as though waiting for somebody or something that might never come, or staring at themselves in a looking glass. Even the hefty milkmaid seemed to be pouring the milk out at her leisure, as though she had nothing else or better to do. So as you can tell, his view of women is one of thinking that they are essentially useless and taking up space. And that's essentially how he treats Sabine. And that's essentially why it didn't work out. As you dive further into Kale's character, you learn that he is somebody who is apathetic in every possible way. He does not want to put the effort in to change or to better or to do anything. Like his optimal situation is just sailing along, doing what he's doing. Something might happen or it might not. but he's not a man of action or of care or of intention. His life is all about there's not a reason not to do something rather than a reason to do something. And I truly loathed him so much. I loathed him because I've met people like him, and it makes me so angry that like apathy, that not caring and just floating along really is a true form of like antipathy and like not wanting good for somebody. So his life alone without Sabine is described as wilted flowers, empty fridge, microwave, dinners, drinking water from the tap, just empty, lonely, alone. Even his job, his office job, is writing rejection letters to people who don't get a position, which just feels so fitting. And so Claire Keegan that she made that particular detail and particular choice when describing him. I thought it was interesting because I think a lot of ways misogyny is often thought of as like overt actions. Like in the story of Antarctica, I won't give you a spoiler, but the misogyny in that story is very much more in your face. But in this story, it's kind of this slow, subtle blah. And I really liked that, actually. I thought that that was a really interesting commentary on how misogyny maybe is more typically seen or more often seen, and maybe not appreciated as much as what it is. But this story did a great job of illustrating like all the problematic elements to the way that he treats Sabine. This story takes place over a day, and I think it does a really great job of getting everything that it wants to say in a short 50-page story that takes place in a day. It really is kind of Claire Keegan's staple that every word is there because it needs to be there, and it feels like a complete, well-rounded thought that I really enjoyed. I ended up giving this collection 4 stars. I think that Antarctica and the second story, which is called A Long and Painful Death, I don't think they're as strong as the first story in this collection so late in the day. I think you can really see her evolution as an author reading those initial stories that were in Antarctica and then also reading her most recent story so late in the day next to them. But I did really enjoy this new short story that she published. So I ended up giving this a 4 stars overall. So to wrap up this vlog, this week I read 5 books by Claire Keegan. And they, of course, were first off Antarctica, short story collection. Then Walk the Blue Fields / Forester's Daughter, and also a short story collection. Foster, novella. And Small Things Like These, also novella. And finally, So Late in the Day, which was her most recent work and a short story collection. So if I had to rank these from least favorite to most favorite, I would say least favorite is Antarctica. I enjoyed this. I just don't think it's as good as her most recent work. Next, I would say Walk the Blue Fields, although there are some bangers in here. Forester's Daughter was excellent. Walk the Blue Fields was also excellent. The short story in here, but again, I don't think it's quite at the level of her more recent work. Then we have So Late in the Day would come in third. Solid, just didn't have the magic that her other 2 works had. Second place is Small Things Like These. I loved this. I truly did, but it didn't have the perfection that Foster did. I loved this so much. This is probably going to be my favorite book of the year, if I'm going to be honest with you guys. But who knows? There could always be another one. And it probably goes without saying, but Claire Keegan maybe is my new favorite author. I would without a doubt pick up another book that she writes. I am following her on Goodreads and everywhere else. And as soon as I hear any whisperings of any new work by her, I will be all over it, because this week of reading her work, honestly, I could have read double the number of pages. I could have read double the number of books by her and been equally as happy, been even happier, because every piece of her work is unique and beautiful. Her writing is stunning. I love that she writes short work, and I love that she is concise with her words, but tells a full story with them. And she's just the best. She really is. So with that, if you have reached the end of this video, leave me a dog emoji for this very cute dog on the front of Forrester's daughter. This little girl and the dog. Leave me a dog emoji. And I would also love to know in the comments down below, have you read Claire Keegan? What are your thoughts about her? Which work do you like the best that she's written? And any similar authors that you think I should pick up if I enjoyed her work. I would love to know that. All right, so with that, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you guys very soon with another video. Bye.